Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the Hinted Neuron podcast. On this week's episode, you'll hear me talk with Katherine Davies. Katherine Davies is a product of RAPE, and she was kind enough to come on the podcast to share her story, share her own views, and have a conversation with me around rape culture, and a little bit about mental health. Before we dive right in, I have a little comment concerning last episode. Although I had a lot of critique concerning last episode, and I take much of the fault for that. I think going on in these conversations with people, I want to try to make it a 50-50 kind of conversation whereby I contribute to the conversation as much as my guests are contributing. And I hope that helps to make this conversation more interesting. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe. Leave me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, share this episode, and also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Hinted Neuron. And now, here's my conversation with Katherine Davies. I am here with Katherine Davies. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me today.
A good place to start would be you highlighting your own story. And, just giving us your experience and at the time what it felt like and what you think, what emotions you actually faced that time and, the whole happenings around that event, how it was like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was a kid, I noticed that my connection with my mother and I wasn't very strong. As a child, you just have this natural expectation for your parents to express and show love to you. And I wasn't experiencing that. And so when I found out that I was a product of rape, it started making a little more sense, it did help to understand. But growing up with my mom, I adore her. But it was really hard. She would call me multiple curse words at the age of 6 and tell me that she had wished I was never born. And hearing that as a child, it can be very emotionally scarring. It can affect your view of yourself, even going into adulthood now, me being 20. And there's a lot of guilt. I always like to kind of focus on the subject of guilt because I understood from a very young age that I was a reminder for my mother. I was a constant reminder of the experience she had had with my birth father. And although it's not my responsibility, it was never my responsibility to ease that for her, I still felt that. And because of the way that she treated me in my youth and because of the emotional abuse that I faced, I felt very guilty just for existing and a choice that I had no part of. But we do have a better relationship now, and we have talked about it, which is good. But I still try to acknowledge it because it did happen. And I think that when you are a product of rape, growing up, everything's always very focused on our mothers. And of course, they have been through so much, and rape is such an important topic to talk about. But sometimes, a lot of the time, actually, products of rape, we can be forgotten about. And the way that we are raised isn't touched on. Many times, the mothers will not be equipped emotionally to handle what is usually referred to as the rapist's baby. Many people just refer to it as the rapist's baby rather than the victim's baby. And it's so important that we can acknowledge that we're victims too. And we have to struggle with our identities growing up. For me, I also struggled with even just finding myself beautiful, which is a normal thing that girls go through at a young age, of course. But I'm half Puerto Rican, half Caucasian, and my entire family is Caucasian, and I adore them so much. But I didn't grow up with anyone that looked like me. And I felt that I had all my father's features. And it took a very, very long time for me to learn to love myself as an individual rather than always feeling like I had this connection to this man that I had nothing to do with.
At what age did you find out?
Oh goodness. I probably found out at around the age of 10, maybe a little before that. I actually found out by accident. I don't remember the exact moment I found out I was a product of rape, but I do remember when I found out that my stepfather, who has been my father since I was 3, so I consider him my real father. But when I found out that he wasn't my biological father, I was very young and I needed to just get like a glass of water. And my parents were outside talking to the neighbors. And they were talking about some man and I was too young to understand. So if they hadn't told me after that, I probably wouldn't have remembered. But yeah, it was around when I was 10. So I knew at a very young age, and I knew before they had planned to tell me originally as well. So I've had a lot of time to process it over the years.
But I'm very sure you are fine now and you've, gotten away with most of those guilt. But based on your mental health, how did it affect you as a kid, even developmentally and, academically? How do you think those things played out for you?
Well, I developed depression at a very young age. I've actually struggled with mental health most of my life. And as a child, my self-worth, my self-image of myself was very, very negative. I hid what I was going through from the rest of my family. My stepdad, sometimes I would tell him what she would say to me or what she would do to me. There wasn't much physical abuse, but there were little things like squeezing my arm too hard or scratching me or small hits. And I kept that to myself, and it really affected me. And even today, sometimes I still struggle with it, more in the sense of I felt at a very young age that it was my responsibility to protect everyone else. And that affected me deeply. I had this view of myself that I was this pawn in the world, that I was this person that wasn't meant to be an individual. I was just meant to help everyone else and try to protect and ease everybody else's pain, and that I wasn't meant to have my own pain and acknowledge it. So I kept that from my family for a very, very long time. And, I didn't start talking about it truly till maybe 8th grade. And even then it was very small things. And then when I was 14, I really started sharing with my friends. And I realized it was really hard for me to make connections with people because I held so much pain and so much of my past with me that it was hard for me to focus on just the regular parts of life. And of course, I did make friends and connect with people. But then when something would go wrong in my life or something would trigger that, I would isolate myself constantly. It was really hard for me to let people in to those vulnerable states because I just held it in for so long. But when I was 18, actually, I made the decision to admit myself into a mental hospital because I almost jumped off a bridge. I almost had a suicide attempt. And that was because, there were a lot of other factors in my life. I wouldn't just say it was because of my childhood, but because I didn't get the help that I needed. I wasn't given the proper treatment at a younger age in life. It then just built up and everything just kept piling and piling and piling. And so I did make that decision when I was 18, and I'm glad I did. I'm really glad I did. I still struggle with certain things, but if I hadn't done that, I would definitely be in a much different place than I am now.
Yeah. Looking back and, at your whole experience and what you passed through, What do you think if there was enough awareness and maybe a kind of close knit community around these issues, something like a support group, what do you think? Do you think things would have played out differently for you if there was like this support from people who are just, are about this same issue? Do you think your own story would have, maybe slightly changed a little because you've had support from them?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. I absolutely think that things would have been different. You know, my mother and I have talked a lot about what she went through, and she did share with me that she always regretted not getting therapy. You know, of course she had support from her family, and she was actually married to my biological father. So she got a divorce, a restraining order. So she did take certain steps, but he was never convicted. And because of those things, certain things that she did, like keeping him out of my life, was actually very healthy for me. But then not being able to help herself then really boiled down then into me. And I do wish that she had gotten the proper therapy. And it really wasn't until I had gone to a mental hospital myself that my family really started taking mental health seriously. It wasn't that they were negative on it. It just wasn't something, it was kind of a taboo subject in the family. It wasn't something that was talked about very seriously before. So like personally, I've seen firsthand how a family dynamic can change once you take a drastic step, a healthy drastic step, of course. I know some people might hear that and think of negative things, but I mean a healthy step, and then start taking things more seriously. I think something that really bothers me about the community is that we're not very connected. There isn't much unity with us. And I wish there was. And the only unity that I have been able to find in my search online is when it comes to the abortion topic. And I found many websites and a couple websites where people do get to share their stories, but it's only pertaining to whether or not you should be pro-choice or pro-life. And there is so much more to products of rape than just being a voice to the abortion topic, And I think that although, of course, anyone who does choose to do that has the right to, of course, but because of how prominent it is, it takes away from what it's like to actually experience being a product of rape in our youth, in our adult lives. And if there was just more awareness on this, more encouragement, more normalization, then I would hope that women would feel more comfortable getting whatever type of professional help that they are able to get in order to help their children grow up healthy. Because women who do choose to have their child after they've been through such a traumatic experience, they are already so strong. I'm not saying that they're not. I view my mother as such a strong person, but it doesn't end there. It does not end there. There's still more things to do. There's still more work to be done. And it can be exhausting, but it has to benefit everyone, Yeah.
You talked about you talked about the person not being convicted, your biological father. But I want us to go towards the route of rape laws. But I think before we enter into that, I want you to talk about, because I know you must have thought about how we could effectively go about helping victims of rape and products of rape, in this society. You might have thought about it in that sense. So if you were to care for people, how do you think we could start helping victims of rape and products of rape in society that will be really, really efficient?
Oh, that is a good question. I'll be honest, I am still trying to figure that out myself. I definitely am doing this to hopefully spread awareness and hopefully be a person that people can connect with. Growing up, I didn't have any representation and I didn't have anyone that I could talk to about this particular thing. I mean, I've still never met anyone who's also a product of rape. So I think that community is a good step specifically for products of rape, to be able to relate to each other, talk to each other, have someone who understands, because in so many situations we can get help, but knowing that we're not alone in what we've been through and other people have experienced this, I think just helps, and it lifts such a weight off you. When it comes to rape laws, I was reading about I was reading today a little bit about this one girl who wanted to convict her biological father of rape. Her mother had lost the case, and now that she was older, she was talking about how she was physical proof of what had happened, but they wouldn't put it through. And I think that there could definitely be changes. It's definitely a controversial subject, because there isn't much talk about if the child then can convict their birth father for what their mother went through, especially since it's more of a second party kind of thing. But if there were changes in that, I think that would really help, because I've never met someone who is also a product of rape, but I do know many children and kids my age and younger who have abusive parents. And it's not that we don't love our parents, we still love our parents very, very much. I think that there should be options for a child to seek out justice for their mothers, because no matter what we've been through, there's still a love for them, and they deserve justice. And I think that it would be really helpful if programs were made more available for women who have been through it. Because my mom didn't know where to go to, and she has her own mental issues. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but she has her own things that she's had to work through over the years, and sometimes it's hard for her to seek out help. We can't always just expect people to just seek out help on their own. I think if there was a bigger hand in it, and they were made more available to women and more affordable as well, then that could definitely be beneficial towards helping towards mental health and being able to process it.
Yeah. Because I understand the social stigma around rape. People really don't want to speak out because of the stigma. And I think one of the things I'm quite glad about, and I think why I am still optimistic about society is that we now have so many rape crisis centers springing up and, helping Discourse. But do you think they are still, do you think they are enough at this moment? What do you think they could be doing better?
I think that, I think there could be more. I don't know how to really use the term advertising. That sounds so strange to use with that, but it could just be like, a lot of people don't even know about them in general, like if they could advertise these better and just get the word out more, I think that would be really good. And the thing is, like, it's so many women find it so scary, because not only just convicting a rapist, but also just getting help, because there's so much judgment behind it. It's hard to think about, but today we still have to deal with people saying that a skirt is too short, or, you put yourself in a position, and that's ridiculous to be saying. But if we can also just break that stigma and just lessen the pressure, just not have there be so much pressure on women, then I think that it would be just easier for them to be able to go to rape crisis centers, if that makes sense.
That really makes sense, though. But what do you think? I don't know how this question sounds. Stranger, if your mom had like a stranger rape, do you think it would have been different from from a rape whereby the person was close enough or an acquaintance. In that sense, I don't know whether that question sounds right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't particularly understand the question. Do you mean if she hadn't known the
No,
rapist?
no, yes. If it was a stranger rape, or like if the rape was a quite different kind of scenario where it was a stranger, do you think things would have played out differently?
You know, I think they would. I can't speak on her behalf when it comes to what she would have chosen to do. But I do know that since she did know him and they were married, she had to go through the divorce process, the restraining order process. She had to go to court multiple times. She had to go to court when it came to who got parental rights. And if she hadn't had to go through all of that already, then maybe she would have felt more comfortable than prosecuting him for rape, because she already had so much to go through already. And if she hadn't had to do that, then maybe it would have been easier for her. And then at the same time, I also think about growing up. There's also the question of wanting to know your birth parent. And I did for a very long time. And I actually did meet him, and it brought me a lot of peace finding out who he was. I like meeting him, and also, the basic questions of like if there's, their family's physical history, and just getting to know if I had anything like to worry about. But it definitely brought me a lot of peace being able to meet him. And then I eventually cut him out of my life after a couple months because he's still a very manipulative person. And then actually even getting to meet him and not that I could ever understand exactly what she went through, but getting to actually talk to him and see the gaslighting and the manipulation, and actually getting to experience just a smidgen of what she did really helped me understand her. So I think that if it had been a stranger, I don't know if I would have gotten that opportunity as well to understand her in that way, to understand myself in that way, and find some sort of inner peace with still having the natural desire to meet a birth parent, but also the conflicting guilt and the controversy with meeting your mother's rapist and what to do about that, how to go about it appropriately in a way that respects her, in a way that respects your family. Because my family, of course, like had to watch her go through this. And it was a big moment in my family's life. I was lucky enough they were supportive of it, but I definitely think things would have been different. I think maybe it could have been better for her, legally. But for me personally, in the long run, I think it might have been worse, actually.
This whole experience since childhood for you, how do you think it affected your worldview, how you saw the world, how you saw people, how to relate to people in the world? How do you think that affected your own worldview?
Oh boy. That is a good question. I think that as a child, of course, I just started trying to process it. I think because because of me trying to process something so huge at such a young age, I've just kind of become this person where I'm always trying to think about why people do what they do, how I can help, how I can relate, how to make things better. And that's definitely helped me as an adult. As a child, though, I think I mentioned before that I kind of viewed myself as a pawn. So my worldview was that I was very small. Like I was very just this small thing in this huge world, and everyone else was so important, and I was just me, and I didn't like matter so much. And then when I started sharing with people, that started changing. When I started being able to relate to people about different types of abuse and life experiences on a deep and vulnerable level, being able to have that connection with people helped me humanize not only other people in a natural way, but also myself. And I held many people above me when it came to value. Other people's needs were more valuable than mine. But now that I've gotten older and I'm an adult now, I definitely have a much different worldview. I think that being able to talk to my mother and work through our own issues has helped me become a kinder and more understanding person, because we always talk about abusers I think in a demonizing way a lot of the time. And it's not that abusers should be excused for if they were victims as well, but it also doesn't exclude the fact that they were victims as well. I think being able to talk to people and really just listen and understand what they've been through, why they've done what they've done, has just helped me have more of an understanding that everyone has a story. Everyone has things that they've been through. And just because they react in the way that I wouldn't react doesn't mean it's the wrong way.
You brought up a very interesting point. I don't know if you follow some issues on Twitter where there's this whole gender wars all the time, where people are always, insulting each other that men are the problem with the world, that because they are the one who perpetuate these crimes, and people still saying that because you haven't assaulted or raped anyone doesn't mean you are part of the problem. What do you think about those kind of back and forth around these issues between both genders?
Oh, yeah, that's a difficult topic. Oh my goodness. I actually, I have a lot of male friends all my life. My closest friends have been male, and we've actually had a lot of conversations like this. We've had a lot of conversations about not only rape culture, but even just being respectful towards each other physically and emotionally. And I think that I wish it wasn't always, when it comes to the extreme that aspect, I wish it wasn't always viewed as men versus women. It's supposed to be us coming together to solve the issue, because yes, it is true that men are usually the perpetrators. And a lot of that can come from low education. A lot of it can come from the expectation on men to not show emotions as often, to not feel comfortable with saying I love you to their male friends, because people might think that that's gay. At least here in America, we have a lot of that stigma, and it doesn't always lead directly to rape, but it does lead to a lot of pent up emotions, and it doesn't excuse it. But if we can have honest conversations with each other about what we face separately as women and men, and still acknowledge that although we have different issues, we can come together. We can come together and try to destigmatize everything. I don't think that it is women against men. I don't think it's that at all. I do know that there are male victims as well, and they don't get talked about very often. I've met a couple of male victims, and it is even harder for them, in my own personal experience, to come out and talk about what they've been through, because people won't listen to them as much. People won't show as much respect for them in their own experience. I'm not generalizing the world. But I definitely think that if we could just have honest conversations with each other without screaming at each other, we would get somewhere.
Yeah, I think I really like the perspective you're coming from, this, humane, loving manner. And, just seeing ourselves as, seeing the better versions of ourselves. I think I like that perspective very much. What advice because I think this is two questions in one. What advice would you have for men on this topic and women on this topic, growing women and growing men? How to approach these issues about rape and rape culture?
Oh man. Whenever I talk to my male friends, I'm always very honest with them. And I think that something that I would advise men to do is have female friendships, have female relationships, and just as friendships, because when you have female friendships, it's not that women are required to educate you, but if you can have a female friend, don't be afraid to ask them certain questions, and we won't have all the answers, but at least being able to have a conversation with a woman who you see as a friend, who you have respect for. And I love my male friends very much, but I will call them out if they're doing something that I find inappropriate.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely important. Like if men want to educate themselves, and I believe that they should, then they can do it online. Me personally, I find it easier to learn through interaction, through people's personal experiences. That's why I say that it would be good to have a female friendship where you can have those conversations in an open environment with someone that you know and trust. That's why I've been able over the years to educate my male friends, and they've been able to educate me as well. Just always try to come from a perspective of understanding. A lot of the time we ask so many questions and we just think about what we're going to answer, and we don't actually listen and process the words that someone is saying. And then if you realize that you're doing something or you've done something that was inappropriate towards a woman, it may not be on the extreme of rape, but something that made them uncomfortable, then you need to think about actions that you can do to not do that again, to change it in a positive way. And don't be afraid to just be open and vulnerable, because holding in all of this pent up emotion, it isn't healthy for you. It isn't healthy for the people who love you and care about you. And it's so much more relaxing to just not have that pressure on your back. I hold a lot of stress in my upper shoulders. And whenever I'm able to release that, I always really feel the physical tension like release. And I think everybody deserves that release. So I would just advise to don't be afraid to have conversations. And if you are friends with men who act in ways that you do not approve of, then personally, I would advise that you shouldn't be friends with those people. I've had many male friends who can be negatively influenced by their other male friends who are, let's say, less emotionally evolved than they are.
Yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, in order to grow, you have to cut out those negative influences.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I think then again, I still like your perspective on these issues. For I've had so many conversations with some female friends of mine. I've talked to them about issues on sexual assault and rape. What do you think they need to know that, people need to know, though, that, society as a whole don't really know? What was one thing that people don't really know about sexual assault and rape?
I think something that not everyone understands is that when you're in the moment, you don't know what you're going to do. I'm lucky enough to have never experienced any serious amount of sexual assault, but I do have many friends who have. I think a lot of times when I've talked to other people, sometimes, I don't know if it's their first thought, but their first reaction is always, oh, well, they should have done this, or they should have done that. They shouldn't have put themselves in this situation. And the thing is, if we go through life just saying that, we're not going to understand. We're not going to be sensitive to what they've been through. And when you are going through what they have went through in the moment, you don't have the right to say that. That's not a reaction people should have, because you don't know what you would do in that moment. Sometimes I can think about a similar situation that I've been through and know that I would do something different, or know that I would fight back in certain things. But when it comes to this particular thing, I don't know what I would do, because with the women and young girls that I've talked to, it's been with people that they've trusted, it's been with people that they didn't expect it from. And you don't know, and you shouldn't have that expectation on anyone that they should have done something different, because it's a very shocking experience. It's very emotional, of course. And then afterwards, there seems to be just this shock of, what do I do now? Who am I now? And I just think I would advise to just listen and never say you should have done this, because you don't know what anyone should have done in that situation. It's too shocking to know what it's like.
Yeah, that's really, really true. And, I've thought about, because I think about these issues a lot, because I'm someone who is particularly interested around gender talks and gender issues in society. So I try to be quite optimistic about some things. But, I've thought about things, because I know we can't completely eliminate rape, just like we can't completely eliminate murder. But how do you think as a society we could lessen these issues drastically? Because though I don't know if it's achievable, but I know, where do we start from if we are to even start at all, where we want to address these things from the roots? How do you think we should approach eliminating rape from society, maybe?
Well, I think that there needs to be more comfortable talks about sexuality. And I think that there needs to be, oh goodness, sorry, I had something in my mind and it just flew out. I believe that in order to lessen rape, there needs to be more education available for people. Not even just in a sexual sense, but just in general. People, normally it's people who aren't as educated who commit these crimes. But I think that I think a lot of it has to do with society. I think that there is definitely a big thing with pressures on men. If we can just continue to have these conversations, if we can give women the proper tools to defend themselves, because although we can provide education, although we can have conversations, that doesn't mean it's going to go away. Give women the proper tools of self-defense mechanisms, not self-defense mechanisms, like self-defense classes, and ways to help keep themselves safe, because we should be able to not be scared walking alone on the street. Like we should completely be free to do that without being scared, but that's not a reality in today's world right now. And I know women who have taken self-defense classes, and it does make them feel safer and it can help prevent things. It's not a surefire way. But I wish I had a direct answer for how to just stop everything and fix it. But I think it's a long process of educating, spreading awareness, of having tough but honest and respectful conversations with each other, and then just also taking those extra precautions to protect ourselves.
I think I like their perspective on more education on these topics. Well, let's center on you now for a bit. Where, let's talk about your day-to-day life. Where are you now at your own life? What are the things you like doing, and what are the things you like talking about most of the times?
Well, I'm just a normal person. I'm taking a gap year right now when it comes to college, and I'm living at home. I actually last year in September, I lost my grandmother, and so I decided to take a gap year and to heal. It was really the first time in my life that I really allowed myself to just take a break and go away from everything. And within this year, I have really grown emotionally, and I'm just letting myself not know exactly what I want to do. I've been considering going into art therapy, because of course I really want to help people in a creative way. I'm starting to do podcasts like yours and trying to spread awareness. And in my day-to-day life, I paint a lot. I hang out with friends. I'm actually trying to have a little Halloween get together, a small one, of course, following COVID guidelines. Of course, don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to throw some party during COVID. No. I'm too frightened for that. And then I'm living at home, so living with my parents and my wonderful siblings. And I just try to go about my day and go to work and watch way too many YouTube videos. It's just a normal life, really.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting though. And just living life with this whole notion of love and happiness and optimism in that sense. So, but what was one thing we've not talked about yet that you think we should really bring up?
I was thinking about this recently. Yeah. I finally started doing this. I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about the subject of abortion because I am trying to, of course, step away from that in a sense. But I was thinking about it a lot, and I actually do think that it is still important to have the conversation, because I think that my view on abortion differs from other products of rape view on abortion, at least within the media that I see. And sorry, you go.
No. Just
I personally, I'm pro-choice, and I realized, at least from what I've researched, I haven't seen any products of rape that are pro-choice. I see a lot of products of rape that are pro-life, and they have every right to believe what they believe. I just, I guess I would like to state that I don't think it's reasonable within my own personal morals to use being a product of rape as being a reason to be pro-life, because I used to be pro-life when I was younger. Absolutely. I know what it's like to have that mindset. But of course, I go back to my mother and I think about my mother, and it's just that, of course, life is so important. I absolutely agree with that. And I admire the point of the points they make about valuing life. But when it comes to pro-choice, I don't think that we're not disinvaluing life in any way. We're just valuing different lives than they are, if that makes sense. I think of my mother she was raped, and then she had to go through a divorce and child custody battle and a restraining order, all while within 9 months of having me grow inside of her and having an emotional, physical trauma to her body and her mind. And I have seen the pain that she has gone through firsthand, and how that has gone to me, how that has affected her own life. And having honest talks with her has helped me understand what she went through. And I personally think it's important for me to state that it is not fair for anyone to expect a woman to go through that. There is pressure on both sides to have the baby or not have the baby. When it comes down to it, though, I do believe it is the woman's choice. And I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this, because it is so controversial, and I do respect the differing side. But it's just, if a woman cannot emotionally handle giving birth to a child that was conceived of rape, then there is nothing wrong with that. Just because she can have the baby doesn't mean that she's equipped to handle it. In this case, would be my mother.
Yeah. That's really interesting though, because I had this conversation on feminism one time on this podcast with Ene Ijato, and we talked about these things, and but she was even of the perspective quite extreme. Not like, though it's not our own opinion, that some of the greatest gifts we can owe children is not even to some of the greatest gifts we owe children is to not even give birth to them at all. Is this anti-natalism worldview, and but though I think that's still a sad way to look at human nature. But do I understand pro-choice? And I think I'm pro-choice because would I say that I've not really had so much I've not really had so much thought on this topic to form, an opinion on where I stand. But I think I'm pro-choice. I'm pro because I like human freedom, in the sense that I want people to live fully and, enjoy the kind of lives that they want to. And you can't have that kind of full enjoyment if you're not pro-choice.
Absolutely. And
yes,
it's okay to still be figuring it out. It took me a really long time I was very, very much pro-life at one point in my life. And I used being a product of rape as a reason for that. So I do understand where they're coming from. But as I got older, it changed. It really did. And I think it also changed because I realized that personally, I don't really have the desire to have children. Maybe one day I will adopt when I'm, in my 30s and I'm settled down. It's not that I've closed off the option, but when I realized that I don't have a desire to have children, especially to give birth, I then really had to think of it from my own perspective of, well, I'm pro-life. So, of course, with my own morals and beliefs, I would have to give birth to this child. And it really started having me question things. And then I started asking my mother more questions about what she had been through. I just think that I think that, of course, I respect it and I understand that life is very important. And, I love my life, but if my mother had not had me, maybe she wouldn't have had a constant reminder. Maybe things would have been easier for her. Many people, many people say to me sometimes, well, what if your mother had aborted you? And I was like, I'm always just kind of like, look, I love my life and it's not perfect. I'm still working through a lot of things, but I'm proud of where I am now and who I've become. But if that would have been the best thing for her, then that would have been the best thing for her. Life is important and has value, but all lives have important value. All lives, including the mother's lives. I think sometimes, from my own personal perspective, the pro-life movement can forget that and then not focus on what happens afterwards as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like your perspectives on these issues. I like how you view life and your own beliefs in maybe, yeah. But, looking back at your life and, just with a thorough self-introspection and your own experiences, what do you think is the meaning of life?
Oh, whew, that's a big question. Oh, goodness. Oh my gosh. Whew. I don't think I've ever been asked that before, actually. I mean, I've joked about it before, but that is a big question. I don't think there is any one meaning to life, because when you think of the human experience, everyone's is so drastically different. I mean, our minds work so differently. And finding our purpose is such an important thing, but we all have individual purposes as well. So the meaning of life, I mean, I think that the meaning of life, goodness, I think that we're supposed to live a life that will make us the happiest, that will make us the most content. I think happiness is so important, but also being content with where you are and being at peace with yourself is so important. I don't think there's any one meaning or one purpose. I think I just believe that if we can all learn to respect each other, respect our opinions, and just have a life that is just full of love and many different experiences, then that's what it's all about, I find purpose in having these conversations. I find purpose in being able to spread awareness through this. And, maybe that's what it is for me, but definitely just being able to have the freedom to figure it out, having the freedom to figure it out and just focus on what's going to make me happiest. That's definitely a big thing for me. If I'm in a situation where I am miserable, then I just shouldn't be in that. Oh goodness. I've really never been asked that question before, but I guess just the meaning of life would just be to do what's best for yourself, as long as, of course, it's not, negatively affecting a lot of people, but just to live your life to the fullest, which sounds so cheesy, but I think it's very true.
Yeah. That's interesting. I just ask people that question at the end of the podcast just to get their own perspective on things. Personally, I don't know if there's any meaning to life. I don't know if I am interested in finding it out. But, it's an interesting question. So
no, it definitely is. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. So I'll put you on the spotlight now. You just say anything you feel like the audience of this podcast should hear. Anything at all that you want them to know. I have an audience in the US and in Nigeria here. So, just anything you feel they should hear.
Oh, well, hi. I guess I'd just like to say thank you, of course, for listening to my story, especially if you've made it through the whole thing. And thank you so much for taking the time to hear me out. I definitely, I believe in everything that I've stated, and I stand by everything that I've stated. I think it's important that we need to understand each other. And if there is anyone out there who is also a product of rape, you are not the only one. We are here. And yes, of course, we did talk about the abortion topic. There is so much more. And if anyone would like to contact me on this, my Instagram is Big Poof Ball, which is a very silly Instagram. But if anyone would like to contact me on Instagram, I am completely open to that. If anyone wants to share their stories with me in order to have someone to relate with, have a connection, even for a moment, that's always been something that's very important to me. And if you are a person who wants to learn more about this, like I mentioned before, don't be afraid to have those conversations. These are so important. And even if we have differing views, we can still respect and come to an understanding. I think it's very important that we can all respect each other. And I hope that this has helped someone. So thank you.
Yeah. I think I really love this conversation. It was really, really interesting with you. And, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast, for sharing your story, for giving me this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This has been like really great. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and just thank you again for having me on. This has been a really good experience.
Hey there, thank you for listening to the end. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, share, comment, follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Hinted Neuron. I'm always ready to answer any questions, comments, or concerns. And that'll be me for this week. And until then, stay curious.